Professor Renkin. He was a professor of physics at Würzburg in Germany, and was doing some experiments with a Crookes tube, which was a vacuum tube, and you passed a high voltage electrical current through, and a beam went through it that was eventually determined to be a beam of electrons. And this is a Crookes tube that this is before it unactivated. Here it is activated. The current goes through here to the anode, and then there's a spray of other electrons, because it's not very well focused there, creating X-rays, what they call bremsstrahlung, or radiation, stopping radiation. Okay. He was doing some experiments with the Crookes tube, and he had it covered with black paper with just a hole for the beam. He wanted to study the fluorescence and kept the rest of the room in the dark. And on November 8th, 95, he noticed when he was doing his experiments that crystals some distance from the tube were fluorescing when he turned it on. And it wasn't electric, and so it had to be something going through the air. And it wasn't cathode rays, because he knew they were inside the Crookes tube. He commented to a friend at the time, he discovered something, don't know if it's, my observations are accurate. He told absolutely no one, and then he submitted the paper 20 days later. Boy, that's really good, something. Mrs. Renkin, she brought in food and she helped. At that time, one of the benefits of being a professor was you got a free apartment in there. So they lived in the physics department, and she would bring over food. And he stayed 18, 20 hours a night or a day in the area while he was working on his new project. Okay, and here is the setup he had. This is the power source. This is a rectifier. Here's the tube here, the cathode ray tube. This is a big thing to keep a vacuum in place here. One of the first observations was he used Mrs. Renkin's hand to say, let's see what happens to it. And as you see, the bones were visible, as was her ring. And she was said to have a feeling of death, the idea that you could see bones, that it really scared her to see that happen.
We have a certain way of doing things. You'll see it in the determination of our students, in the classroom and on our fields, in the collaboration among our faculty that lead to great innovation and change, in the vision of our writers, artists, and doctors, bringing the world to Iowa and Iowa to the world. It's the Hawkeye way.
There are over 24,000 bridges in Iowa. But only one connects University of Iowa hospitals and clinics to Iowa River Landing. From pediatrics and women's health to cardiology and routine exams, world-class medical care can be found at a new, convenient location in Coralville. Iowa River Landing is here, and it's designed just for you. For an appointment, call 319-467-2000.
Show your Iowa pride, the Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. The ultimate collection of Iowa Hawkeye merchandise, gifts, and apparel. Help support the University of Iowa. All proceeds benefit men's and women's athletic teams and student programs. The Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. Show your Iowa pride. Call 1-800-HAWK-SHOP or visit www.hawkshop.com.
On, I think it was November 25th or 28th, a few days, within 3 or 4 weeks, he gave a presentation to the faculty of Würzburg. This is a fake picture done by the Park Davis Drug Company, and they put in some famous physicists and stuff there. But anyway, this is Renkin up in front, showing his X-ray tube, and they had a hand there, and they showed how it could go through flesh. It was backdated, his publication, to show that it was in 1895. It actually didn't come out till January of '96, but he wanted to make sure that he was the first. It was instantly acclaimed, and he won many awards, but he didn't take any trips, except when he won the Nobel Prize. He traveled to Stockholm, but he wouldn't give a lecture. And when he was asked to go places for a lecture, he'd say, just let them read my papers. Well, that's different behavior than academicians do these days. He was interviewed by McClure's magazine in German, but it says also French and scientific English. I don't know what that means. It said it was a plain lab. He would not allow the reporter to take a photo of him, and she thought he was terribly modest. They asked him what was going to happen in the future. He says, I don't know. I'm opposed to prophesizing. I'm just doing experiments. If you're ever traveling in Germany from the south to Frankfurt, Würzburg's just about an hour south of Frankfurt, and the Physics Institute's just about a 8 or 10 block walk from the railroad station. And this is it from the outside. And in this house, Professor J.C. Renkin in 1895 discovered X-rays. And if you push a little bit, if you tell them you're a physicist or a radiologist or something like that, they'll let you into his lab. And it's not open to the public, and they've left it the way he left it when he left Würzburg. So this is all his thing. You can see the X-ray tube right there. Pretty exciting to be able to see that.
Logic's going to take 10 seconds, crossing half court. 8, 7. Printing off the screen, launches a long 3. Yes! Got it! With 1 second left! We're tied! Iowa literally steals one on their home court in overtime.
Tradition.
Ambition.
Exploration. Inspiration.
You feel it when you step on campus at the University of Iowa.
The energy and pride of students inspired by our history.
And excited about our future.
When you join the Hawkeye family, you're a part of it all.
Be a part of it.
Be a part of it.
Be a part of it.
Be a Hawkeye.
We have a certain way of doing things. You'll see it in the determination of our students, in the classroom and on our fields, in the collaboration among our faculty that lead to great innovation and change, in the vision of our writers, artists, and doctors, bringing the world to Iowa and Iowa to the world. It's the Hawkeye way.
Personally, he was born in the Rhineland. His father's a merchant, mother was Dutch. He got his degree in mechanical engineering and his PhD at Zurich. And this is a picture of him as a young man with his parents. He married Anna Ludwig when he was in Zurich, and they never had any children, but they did raise an orphan daughter of Anna Ludwig. Picture of Professor Renkin and Mrs. Renkin. He became a very famous person, and was appointed by the King of Bavaria to become professor of physics at the University of Munich, where he stayed until he retired. When World War I came along, he gave all his medals to the government to melt down the gold as part of the war effort, and that he observed all the restrictions that everybody was, except he smuggled in Dutch tobacco. And after the war, he was wiped out by the inflation that went in Germany. He was an apolitical person. He was said to be disturbed by the anti-Semitism which was going on in Germany at the time. Mrs. Renkin died in 22, and he died a year later at age 78. Were there people that preceded him? Probably. These are the Goodspeed, Crook, and Lenard, who had invented a similar tube. Goodspeed noticed some studying electrical sparks, and noticed that there were circles of things on his static electricity images, and he didn't tumble to what it meant. Crook, the inventor of the tube, he had film in his laboratory, photographic film that was fogged, and he thought it was a defect in the manufacturing, so he sent it back to the manufacturer. And Lenard, who said he had unexplainable observations, which I carefully kept for future investigation, but I didn't start it on time. Things really got started fast. This is an ad that was in the Vienna newspapers 3 weeks after Renkin announced the discovery of X-ray, and saying, if you want to buy an X-ray tube, we'll sell it to you. The jokesters got into it. Also, this was, they didn't exactly understand the concept of X-ray. And they're still going on today with this picture of Homer Simpson and his brain. All sorts of things. Then the various entrepreneurs had all sorts of things that they brought up, like the X-ray tablets, X-ray liniment, X-ray flashlight battery, and X-ray incubator, if you can believe that, for hatching chickens. And X-ray whiskey, which would be nice for if they gave a discount to radiology people, and even prophylactics, condoms. And how that related to X-ray, I don't want to speculate. This is a letter from Renkin to the Siemens company, which is a big German X-ray manufacturer. And they're very proud of it. They keep it around, and he said, you supply me with X-ray tubes, you do a good job, and your tubes are fine, but you charge too much money. And Siemens is glad to, they show that to anybody that comes around, that they do good work, but they charge for it.
Second down and 2, Bodell. In motion. Green has the first down in the middle. Makes a mark, 20, spins, stay on his feet. Wide line, goal line, touchdown Iowa. You will never see a prettier run than that.
There are over 24,000 bridges in Iowa. But only one connects University of Iowa hospitals and clinics to Iowa River Landing. From pediatrics and women's health to cardiology and routine exams, world-class medical care can be found at a new convenient location in Coralville. Iowa River Landing is here, and it's designed just for you. For an appointment, call 319-467-2000.
The Hawkeye Wrestling team is ready for the 2013-2014 season. How about you? Get ready by purchasing your season tickets today. For only $85, the Hawkeyes host wrestling powerhouses Oklahoma State and Minnesota at Carver Hawkeye Arena this season. And Tony Ramos, Derek St. John, and Bobby Telford want to see you there for another electrifying season of Hawkeye Wrestling. To purchase your tickets, call 1-800-IA-HAWKS or visit HawkeyeSports.com for more information.
several people got involved in X-rays. This is a sketch made by Edison. Thomas Edison was going to get involved in X-ray, and the person he had working in his lab, his hair fell out. And so Edison says, I'm going to stay away from this. This is too scary for me to mess around with. And he didn't go any further. This is a picture of it typically at work. You see the bare X-ray tube there and the patient below, no protection of any sort for anybody there while they took an X-ray of the leg. One of the ways that you would try to get your voltage up to where you wanted it was to take a fluoroscope like this, hold your hand in front of it with the X-ray tube on, then crank up the voltage until you'd see your hand the way you wanted it, and then you knew that that was the appropriate voltage. Fluoroscopy was done probably more than static films, particularly of the chest. And this was the way it was done. In a darkened room, the X-ray tube, and the patient is in front of the physician, and the fluorescent material is behind, and no protection for anybody there. Here's a current X-ray tube. I won't bore you with all the details of this, except it's very highly focused now, and the anode is here, and it's a spinning disc, so you can spread the heat over the whole disc. And heat is the main thing. About 99% of the energy that comes across is heat. About 1% is X-rays. A few years later, Becquerel in Paris was working with uranium, and he had some uranium in a desk and a piece of film above it for some reason, and there was an iron cross between them. And when he developed the film, and I don't know why he did, anyway, he noticed that there was activity there that was blocked by the iron there. So he had discovered radioactivity. This is Marie Curie and her husband, is it Paul or Philip? I don't remember, who then were students or graduate students like that in Becquerel's lab, and they discovered radium out of uranium. Mr. Curie was killed in a year or two after they started their work. He was in it wasn't an auto, there weren't automobiles, a stagecoach ran him down on the streets of Paris. And Madame Curie went ahead to, this is her thesis on the discovery of radium and its radioactivities. For that, she was awarded the Nobel Prize. She took her trip to Stockholm too, but they didn't ask her to give a talk because it would be unseemly to have a woman talking to a group of men. To get you an idea of making radium so it would be commercially available, this is a picture of Mrs. Curie with others. And this huge tub there was filled with, I don't know, things, including uranium, to get tiny amounts of radium in the range of 5 milligrams or something like that. Here's the first X-ray done in Iowa, as far as we know. This is by a professor at Grinnell. He was a professor of physics, and he hooked up his Crookes tube and put a frog there, and sure enough, got an X-ray.
Continues in the zone below. Oh, beautifully done! Clemens to Aaron. Steals it away. She's got Pruny. Instead, she'll go coast to coast and finishes with the right hand.
We have a certain way of doing things. You'll see it in the determination of our students, in the classroom and on our fields, in the collaboration among our faculty that lead to great innovation and change, in the vision of our writers, artists, and doctors, bringing the world to Iowa and Iowa to the world. It's the Hawkeye way.
Show your Iowa pride, the Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. the ultimate collection of Iowa Hawkeye merchandise, gifts, and apparel. Help support the University of Iowa. All proceeds benefit men's and women's athletic teams and student programs. The Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. Show your Iowa pride. Call 1-800-HAWK-SHOP or visit www.hawkshop.com.
There are over 24,000 bridges in Iowa. But only one connects University of Iowa hospitals and clinics to Iowa River Landing. From pediatrics and women's health to cardiology and routine exams, world-class medical care can be found at a new, convenient location in Coralville. Iowa River Landing is here, and it's designed just for you. For an appointment, call 319-467-2000.
I'll now move it to the University of Iowa. And what happened here? This is the old university hospital, and about 1900 or so, they installed an X-ray tube. It was in a space under the stairs in the hallway. And they used glass plates to record the image, and what they would do, they would make the image, carry the glass plate over to the photography department a couple blocks away, develop the image, bring it back, look at it, and then they would clean off the image so they could use the glass plate again. And glass plates were pretty sensitive too. They broke easily, and it was replaced by film within about 10 years. To go back to the biologic effects a little bit, 1896, which was just a year after the discovery of X-ray, there was a medical student, Grabler, who was a student at the University of Chicago, and he noticed that people got X-ray dermatitis, and he thought, well, maybe there's something there as an anti-tumor effect, and it worked, and he became very famous for it. And about 4 years later, Dr. Claude Regard, who was at the Paris Radium Institute, showed that if you would give your X-ray dose over a period of time and give the normal tissue time to recover, then you could you could change the effect between the effect of radiation on a tumor and normal tissue. This is an example of radiation dermatitis. You can see the little vesicles and things there. A lot of the early practitioners of radiology lost fingers. And that was for, well, holding your hand up in front of the fluoroscope was one way. Another one was working with radium. And by the time I got involved in it, it was not all that. We worked faster and knew about that. This was the tumor that Regard did. It was an open breast cancer, and they applied radiation to it and saw it shrink somewhat. And so from that way on, then the field of radiation therapy was born. These are the radium needles, and they were extremely expensive. In the days, they were $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 each, and that would be the equivalent of $30,000 to $50,000 now, and you had to use several of them in a big tumor if you were to do it. This shows a radium implant for breast cancer, so the primary breast cancer was probably here, and then they did the lymph nodes up in the axilla there. When I was a resident, we used to have to calculate the dose from this. It was not fun. You'd take you a half hour to put in the needles and then take you half a day to calculate the dose. Now the computer does it. And occasionally you'd lose a needle for various reasons. This is an example of one that went to the junkyard, and a pig swallowed it, and they found it that way. We had a similar incident in Iowa City. A resident who hadn't been on radiotherapy yet was asked, since he was on call, would he please remove the radium from a patient who was having carcinoma of the cervix treated. He said, sure. And they asked the next day, what'd you do with it when you took it out? And he said, well, I threw it in the trash. And so our physicist and our chief of radiotherapy had to go out to the city dump with a Geiger counter and spend about a half a day till they found the radium
We have a certain way of doing things. You'll see it in the determination of our students, in the classroom and on our fields, in the collaboration among our faculty that lead to great innovation and change, in the vision of our writers, artists, and doctors, bringing the world to Iowa and Iowa to the world. It's the Hawkeye way.
Show your Iowa pride, the Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. The ultimate collection of Iowa Hawkeye merchandise, gifts, and apparel. Help support the University of Iowa. All proceeds benefit men's and women's athletic teams and student programs. The Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. Show your Iowa pride. Call 1-800-HAWK-SHOP or visit www.hawkshop.com.
In the zone below. Oh, beautifully done! Clemens to Aaron. Steals it away. She's got Pruny. Instead, she'll go coast to coast and finishes with the right hand.
This is the first radiologist that came to the University of Iowa, Bundy Allen. He trained for a year in St. Louis and came here in 1918. Was apparently a good practitioner, and it was about half therapy and half diagnosis. But there were some problems. Number one, he didn't make much money. He made $6,000 a year. At the time, private practitioners were making $12,000. And so he kept agitating and agitating. And they finally raised his salary to $8,000 a year. But also the thing that made him worse was they wouldn't give him an academic appointment. They said he was a hospital employee and wasn't a real doctor because he worked with, all he did was work with x-rays. So he became famous in the x-ray world. He became the first editor of the journal. It was called Journal Radiology. As you see, it was first published here. And a couple of years later became president of the Radiological Society of North America, which is the big organization we have. But he finally got mad about 1928 and left, went to Tampa in private practice where he made $12,000 a year and was killed in an auto accident some 5 years later. And to show you sort of how our specialty hasn't been around that long, his wife moved back to Iowa City when, after he was killed, and she moved to Oak Knoll Retirement Facility when she got to be an old lady, and my wife took care of her. And so all that from the first radiologist to one of the last radiologists. When they moved to the new university hospital, there was an x-ray department. This is actually the x-ray department at the Children's Hospital, one of the first that we have a picture of. You see the rectifier here, I think. Again, an open x-ray tube, no protection at all. I think the technologist stood behind this, that was a lead barrier of some sort. By 10 years later, the tubes were then enclosed in lead and a lot of protection. So this is a picture from the 1920s, early 30s. After Allen quit, and incidentally, they couldn't replace him with another academician, so they hired a private practitioner for the same $8,000 a year. And then, then they got on the ball, and in 1930, I think it was, or 30 or 32, they hired this gentleman, Dabney Carr. He was a real East Coast gentleman, well known from Maryland. He had worked in the Peking Union Medical School in China, and the dean at Iowa had been the dean of the medical school there. So when he came here, he induced Dabney Carr to come here, and he served for 20 years as the chair of radiology. He was primarily a radiation therapist. very well-mannered guy. One of the older residents who spent some time with him said, Dr. Carr taught me how to be a gentleman, and Dr. Van Epps, who was his successor, taught me how to cuss. And about that time was what was called the deep therapy tube became available. The amount, you had to have a more powerful X-ray beam to get it into the patient, and this is 250,000 volts, 250 kV. And so it could get the dose in where it was needed most places in the body, but it had bad skin reaction. And so you did it from multiple sides, so you do one from front and back, side to side, and hopefully spread the skin reaction around. This is a picture of Dr. Carr and his group. He is there. This is Carl Gillies, and Carl Gillies had trained at Michigan, spent a year in Cedar Rapids in private practice, decided he wanted to be an academician, so he spent the next 20 or 30 years here. And essentially, Gillies did all the diagnosis, and Carr did the therapy. And it was, one of the guys told me that when Gillies was on vacation, Carr would come up to staff out the films, and he would tell the residents, you got to help me here, boys. And there was also one other person, Dr. Elkins, who I'm told was a decent radiologist, but he was also an active alcoholic. And he was of value during the morning, but they said don't bother him after noon. And one other person I'll point out here is Titus Evans. Titus Evans was brought in by Dr. Carr. He was a radiation biologist who had worked with the Manhattan Project on the atom bomb, and he was attracted here, and he founded the Radiation Research Laboratory, which is still in existence. It's now called the Free Radical Lab. Don't think that this was Women's Lib, that we had a female rep. This was the departmental secretary, I'm told. And this is Dr. Van Epps when he was still a resident, before, well, in the early years of Dr. Carr. Resident reading room, I put this in there to remind me of what they said about Dr. Gillies. They said he would sit in the reading room reading the Wall Street Journal and smoking a cigar. And the residents would be reporting the cases, dictating them, and he would apparently not be paying. And all of a sudden, he'd put the paper down and he'd say, "What did you just say, doctor?" And that it was always a mistake that the guy had made. There was something he hadn't seen. This is Gene Van Epps, who became the successor. When Carr left, well, I'll go on. This is a picture of Dr. Van Epps. He had been a pediatrician who got tired of doing pediatrics, so he came back, took a radiology residency, and when Dr. Carr retired, he became the chief. This is Dr. Gillies. This is some people that some of you in the room will recognize. Howard Latterette, who ran radiation therapy here for 20+ years. Bert Jackson, who was the physicist in radiation therapy. Bill Cohen, who started us in ultrasound. And it was said that Jack Eckstein, the former dean, told me that Van Epps was afraid he wasn't going to get the job here because he was a Catholic and he thought they might not hire Catholics. But they did hire him. But Van Epps had his own thing. He said he would hire anybody, but no foreigners, no Jews, and no women. And that was the way things ran. But I can't put that together because here's Bill Cohen, who joined the group, and he was the first Jewish person on the faculty. Maybe Van Epps didn't recognize that or something, I don't know. Jim Gardner recently retired after many years at Mercy Hospital. Kurt Haas was the radiation therapist in Cedar Rapids for years. Dick Peterson, nuclear medicine here. Steve Cornell was our first angiographer. And Harry Fisher. Harry Fisher was a very colorful guy. He was a surgery resident who developed polio, so he lost skills in his hands and went into radiology. And he wanted to be an investigator, and he had a lab that he shared with Jack Eckstein studying contrast materials. And he and Van Epps fought continually, I understand, that Van Epps didn't think there was any place for research in radiology. And Harry wanted to have time off to do research. And Harry had a big belly, and Van Epps, a fair-sized belly, and I'm told they used to stand and hit bellies with one another out in the hallway while they yelled back and forth. He became the chairman of radiology at Wayne State University after he left here, and then the chairman at Rochester, University of Rochester. Oh, and Dave Hussey, who ran the radiation oncology program here for 20+ years.
The Hawkeyes are rising. With the new season underway, the Iowa men's basketball team is heating things up on the court once again, and you can help get Carver rocking.
Aaron's got to break out and look out below. Contested and showtime.
Single game tickets are now available. Don't miss a minute of the action. Call 1-800-IA-HAWKS or visit HawkeyeSports.com.
Show your Iowa pride, the Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. The ultimate collection of Iowa Hawkeye merchandise, gifts, and apparel. Help support the University of Iowa. All proceeds benefit men's and women's athletic teams and student programs. The Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. Show your Iowa pride. Call 1-800-HAWK-SHOP or visit www.hawkshop.com.
State continues in the zone. The wall. Oh, beautifully done. Clemens to Aaron. Steals it away. She's got Pruny. Instead, she'll go coast to coast and finishes with the right hand.
We have a certain way of doing things. You'll see it in the determination of our students, in the classroom and on our fields, in the collaboration among our faculty that lead to great innovation and change, in the vision of our writers, artists, and doctors, bringing the world to Iowa and Iowa to the world. It's the Hawkeye way.
About that time, truly high-dose radiotherapy became possible by using cobalt. Came from the atomic reactor, radioactive cobalt, and it was stored in this thing here and then was on a fail-safe thing, so you had to keep pressure up to move this cobalt to the active area where it could treat the patient. This is a cobalt machine in action, and because of its energy, you didn't have to worry about skin reaction, or not a lot about skin reaction. It more or less eliminated skin reaction. And about the same time, this is our first automatic processor in the 1950s, and it could process film with a little help from people in only 15 minutes. We had that down to 90 seconds by the time we gave up regular film. And Dr. Van Epps bought this, and apparently he played chicken when he wanted something. He'd write a letter and say, "If I don't get this, I resign." And he did this several times, and so in about 1965, they said the dean accepted his letter of resignation when he sent one of them. And he tried to take it back, and the dean wouldn't do it. And he left. Well, he stayed around for a couple of years, and there was a search that went on for almost 3 years. This is Jim Christie, who became he was in private practice in nuclear medicine in Cleveland, but agreed to take the job. Nice guy. I've asked around why they didn't get somebody for that time, and Jim Clifton, who was the chair of the search committee, said, well, nobody would take the job. But then I had a couple of people tell me that they wanted this job very badly, but it was never offered to them. And that included Mac Jones, who became chair at the University of California, Irvine, and Harold Jacobson, who became chair at Montefiore Hospital in New York City. Anyway, Jim, nice guy, nuclear medicine. brought quite a few people here, including, this was the first woman on the faculty. Donna Suby was a radiobiologist, and after she had been here for a couple of years, she developed acute leukemia and died. And the second woman, who I don't have a picture of, was Joanna Seibert, pediatric radiologist. Took a residency here and stayed on and did a fellowship in pediatric radiology. Moved on to University of Arkansas and is now a deacon in the Episcopal Church. She's one of the few people I've ever known that have changed occupations beyond radiology. And also about that time, we began to do angiography. This is an X-ray tube that had a long distance, so you could go from the chest all the way down to the upper legs. And this is one of the first arteriograms ever done. Hans Ehrenhoff, the former chief of cardiovascular surgery, gave me this. What they did, in the OR, they did a cut down and put it on the right carotid artery and put a catheter and threaded it down the right carotid artery into the ascending aorta, then brought the patient to the X-ray department and injected contrast material and took this film. And it's a coarctation of the aorta. Here's the narrowing right there. These are big collateral vessels, internal mammary arteries. We subsequently developed more benign ways of doing arteriogram. The work kept up. We were using film now, and it got very crowded, but we stuck with it. And then, where am I on time? Hunfeld in England, who worked for the EMI company, which was the Beatles had set up. It was mainly a record company. But on his off time, he was fiddling around, and he had this X-ray tube, and tube here, receptor over there, and he spun this thing around. And what he found out was then you could take X-rays of objects from 360 degrees, and you could get very fine differences. And here's an example of the radiograph he turned out, really in cross-sectional radiology that way. Well, that revolutionized things. And the first CTs that came out would come out this way. They'd give you a picture, but they'd also give you this printout. And one of the engineers told me, said, you guys, you radiologists don't understand. You're not really looking at an image. You're looking at a bunch of numbers that have been manipulated to show you what is inside. And this was one of the first images. This is a patient with a brain tumor, this light here, and then you can see the ventricles there. And it was just astounding that we would be able to do something like that. Jim Christie told me that he had heard about this at the Radiological Society meeting in 1972, and he went over to England, and he saw this thing in operation. They brought in a patient, put her on the machine, and when she was done, they had this huge tape, and they said, well, we'll take this to the factory, and tomorrow we'll bring you the image to look at. And they brought the image to look at, and it looked like this. He was just amazed. And so he came back to Iowa and talked to John Colleton and told him we have to have it. And Colleton essentially wrote him a check for it. It was $300,000 when an ordinary room cost $50,000. And you had to put up half the money up front. And Jim said then he started worrying. He thought it might be a scam. He said, you know, this isn't an X-ray company. This is a music company. He says, how do I know that this image came from that patient? And he said he was afraid he was going to lose his job, that they were going to fire him because he had cost the university $300,000. But as soon as it came in, everything was fine. And this is a picture of him with the new EMI, new brain X-ray machine. This is one of the first patients. It did, I think, 12 slices, took about 60 seconds for each slice, $350,000, biggest breakthrough in 20 years, said. Yeah, we were the 5th unit in the United States to have an EMI. And this is the first person ever receiving an CT at our institution. this was a young guy working here who was an engineer, Dave Owen. He's now in charge of radiology engineering. And they said, we need to see if this works. Would you climb up there? So he did, and they scanned his brain. And this is the picture they saw. You couldn't do things like that these days. And one of the docs looked at it and said, shows too much whiskey.
Hi, this is Coach Bluter, and I'm here to tell you it's game on. The Hawkeyes are ready for the season, and we hope you're ready to join us. Order your Iowa women's basketball season tickets today. Call 1-800-IA-HAWKS or visit HawkeyeSports.com.
There are over 24,000 bridges in Iowa. But only one connects University of Iowa hospitals and clinics to Iowa River Landing. From pediatrics and women's health to cardiology and routine exams, world-class medical care can be found at a new, convenient location in Coralville. Iowa River Landing is here, and it's designed just for you. For an appointment, call 319-467-2000.
The Hawkeyes are rising. The Big Ten season has officially begun for the Iowa men's basketball team. The Hawkeyes will be heating things up on the court once again this Big Ten season, and you can help get Carver rocking.
Aaron's going to break out and look out below. Contested and showtime.
For tickets, call 1-800-IA-HAWKS or visit HawkeyeSports.com.
And another thing that came on about the same time was ultrasound. And ultrasound developed as an offshoot of sonar, which was used by submarines and stuff. So the first machines they had the patient immersed in a water bath like this, but that rapidly changed. And ultrasound, you see the reflections when the acoustic surfaces change. They come back, and if you do it around the wave like that, you can do it like CT, see it from multiple angles and get actual pictures. And then the last unit I'm going to mention is the MRI, which this is a picture that Dabney drew on his application for a patent for an MRI unit. At the time we called it nuclear magnetic resonance because it deals with nuclei, and there was an NMR for chemistry, but it didn't give you a local light. But anyway, if you put a body in a very strong magnetic field, the nuclei will line up in a certain way. And then and this little ring around is a radio transmitter, which acts as a magnet. And if you disturb that field, then the nuclei will go out of orbit, and you can measure them coming back into orbit. And that's the basis, and they put out a signal there, and that's the basis for MRI exam. Dabney, interestingly enough, was not awarded the Nobel Prize. It went to some other people, and he started a campaign with through the New York Times and ads that said he ought to be added to the Nobel Prize list, but he didn't make it. This is an early MR unit. Kind of looks like a pressure cooker. You put the patient in there and then close the lid, and that's the way it goes. This was the first magnet we got. We had to cut a hole in the parking lot to get the magnet in. This is over central sterilizing, and then rolled the magnet over into radiology. And the people were a little over-optimistic about what it might do. I'll let you read this. From the Daily Iowan, 1985, when we first got our MRI unit in. MRI scan necessary to determine if could load knowingly waived his rights if he was insane at the time of the murder, and if he had sufficient mental capacity at the time to form a specific intent. We never really got quite that good. And I think that's it. This is the current chair, or was chair until last year, Laurie Fajardo holding the envelope. She came to us from Hopkins. She's still on the staff. She's in breast imaging. And about, let's see, when was it? It was when I was interim chair the second time. So it was about 1990. We split into two departments, into radiation therapy and diagnostic radiology. And this is John Buati, who's the chair, the only chair there's been in radiation oncology before. And then here is, we've moved, this is the diagnostic radiology department. In 2009, these are our residents and faculty. And I had one of the radiation oncology group, which is about half this size, and I can't find it to put in here.
Tradition.
Ambition.
Exploration.
Inspiration.
You feel it when you step on campus at the University of Iowa.
The energy and pride of students inspired by our history.
And excited about our future.
When you join the Hawkeye family, you're a part of it all.
Be a part of it.
Be a part of it.
Be a part of it.
Be a Hawkeye.
State continues in the zone. The wow! Clemens to Aaron. Steals it away. She's got Pruny. Instead, she'll go coast to coast and finishes with the right hand.
Show your Iowa pride, the Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. The ultimate collection of Iowa Hawkeye merchandise, gifts, and apparel. Help support the University of Iowa. All proceeds benefit men's and women's athletic teams and student programs. The Iowa Hawk Shop, where Iowa shops. Show your Iowa pride. Call 1-800-HAWK-SHOP or visit www.hawkshop.com.
Hi, this is Coach Bluter, and I'm here to tell you it's game on. The Hawkeyes are ready for the season, and we hope you're ready to join us. Order your Iowa women's basketball season tickets today. Call 1-800-IA-HAWKS or visit HawkeyeSports.com.
One of the ways radiology spread was, well, the military application was seen right away because of foreign bodies, you know, of bullets and things like that, and fractured hips. And because of that experience, the Spanish-American War, all the armies in World War I had X-ray schools, and they taught physicians how to, well, in some cases perform and how to read X-rays. And that was really sort of the birth of a radiologist. There were almost none before that. Some were photographers, some were physicists. Most were physicians of some sort, but the Army school and then the German school too, they taught people, they taught physicians how to get involved in radiology.
When I was a kid, there were these little machines.
Yeah.
Where you stuck your foot in.
Yeah.
And you could see your bones.
And then wiggle your toes.
Yeah, tell the person what size shoe you needed.
Yeah.
Were there...
Well, the people who got in trouble with that were not the kids who wiggled their toes. It was the shoe salesman, you know, who was then exposed to this for 100 times a day. And there were some cases of leukemia in the shoe salesman. And they don't do that anymore. Yeah. Bill, you had a comment? I don't know. Well, when Dr. Kerr came here, they found that then we had a separate department. It was an academic department from that time. And that's about the time they started. The American Board of Radiology started in the late 20s, something like that. And they started having residencies then. I think it was a 1-year residency to start, and it was by diagnosis and therapy. Well, the hands were one of the main ones, using the fluoroscope, you know, to do hands, and also working with radium. And I remember a story about an examiner on the American Board of Radiology. We used to take exams in both diagnosis and therapy, and most of us weren't very good. And you do one radium case a month, and so one of the old timers was griping at the to others at the board. He said, "These young men that and women that come around today, and I try to teach them stuff, and I ask them questions. It says they just don't know how to use radium." And he held up his hand like that. You know, a couple of his fingers were gone. The other thing, radium, or just a little bit of physics. Radium has I forget how powerful its gamma ray is, but it's very powerful. So if you put a thin piece of lead in front of it, what it does, it creates secondary radiation and will increase the dose by a factor of about 10 to what you get. And we used to do not OB, but GYN work with OB-GYN residents, and they insisted on wearing lead aprons. And I'd tell them, guys, you're hurting yourself. But they were afraid not to do it, but they increased their thing by a factor of about 10. Then the other, the hair falling out, X-ray epilation by X-ray was found early, and then the dermatitis. Those are the main things. It was a long time before they discovered the long-term effects of leukemia, and there have been studies on longevity of radiologists, and radiologists that were in practice up till the 1940s had reduced longevity. But since the 1940s, there's no appreciable loss of longevity amongst radiologists. You have to get at least, I think is it 10 or 1,000? Yeah, 1,000 rads a year for it to have any known biologic significance. And we're allowed 3 to 5 rads per year as part of occupational work, and there's been no evidence at all that that has any long-term biologic effect. I was expecting to talk on aren't X-rays dangerous, and I had my answer ready, so I'll just give it now. Yeah, the answer is, I read somewhere the way Chinese people out in the sticks, the poor folks, the way they commit suicide is they take a pint of salt and eat it, and that will kill them. You know, I don't know enough about biochemistry, but that seems reasonable. Well, you can compare that to radiology. You know, a few shakes of salt on your food makes it taste good, like just a few rays, and you can get a good diagnosis, but you don't want to take a pound of it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.